The story begins with the wedding of a beautiful woman who came from her village, Sadavia, to Moscow in order to live with her husband there. This beautiful woman is called Anushka, and she's married to an attractive man named Alexei. They love each other very much and help each other at home. Many months passed, and Anushka felt very tired. She ultimately found out she was pregnant. She told her husband, "I have a surprise for you. We will have a beautiful baby soon. You will be a great father." Alexei was pleased and said to her, "What great news! Finally, we will have a beautiful baby. I feel like I'm over the moon." Several months passed, and one day Alexei was at work, and his wife called him, screaming, "I'm giving birth now! Come right away!" He came right away and took her to the hospital. Anushka cried out in excruciating pain, but ultimately gave birth to a lovely girl. They called her Juliana. This overwhelming joy they felt, though, did not last long, because Juliana was suffering from a severe health condition. The doctor explained this to them, saying, "Juliana's very weak. We will have to take her to the nursery. It's clear that this weather has affected her." The little girl was taken to the nursery and the hospital as a result. Weeks passed, and Anushka recovered. Ultimately, she decided to do something she remembered from her days in her village of Sadavia. The weather there is gorgeous. There are forests and fresh air, in addition to the fact that the food there is very healthy. Anushka decided to send her young daughter to her grandmother in the village to live there. After reaching this decision, she told her husband, saying, "I want to talk to you about something. Our little daughter is now in a very serious situation. As you can see, the weather here is very difficult for her health. I'm terrified for her, so I'm considering sending her to live with my mom in Sadavia, where the weather's right for her. There are also healthy vegetables and fruits." "You're right," said Alexei. "Our child would be in danger here. I also think she'll be fine with your mother there in the village. The weather there is nice and healthy for her. She can stay there until she recovers, and then we will take her to live with us here." So many months passed, and Juliana lived with her grandmother, Elena. Juliana loved her grandmother very much. Her grandmother took excellent care of her, fed her healthy food, and brought her everything she wanted. Grandma Elena also took care of constantly taking her granddaughter to the doctor to check her health condition. Juliana became attached to her grandmother more than anyone else. 3 years passed, and Juliana recovered thanks to her wonderful grandmother who devoted her life to her. Juliana loved to play in the house garden a lot, but no children were there. She could not find anyone to play with. One day, Juliana was playing alone in the garden when she heard the sound of a crow. She stared at it and she greatly admired it. Juliana did not know if the crow was male or female, but she decided to name it Dom. She considered him a friend. Now, it's common knowledge that crows eat the remains of dead animals or pests found among crops or fruits, such as apples, grapes, figs, and grains. Crows are very active in the early morning and the afternoon. Therefore, their movement increases during this time, and they have increased hunting activity to get food. Crows are also very smart. They throw nuts in front of cars until they break from the wheels of the car, and then they eat what's inside. They also throw shellfish onto rocks to break them and eat what's inside. That crow lived in the tree in Juliana's garden. The strange thing, though, is that this tree was scarce, and there's no other one like it anywhere. This tree has been around for many years, and no one knew who planted it. Many people in the village tried to plant a tree like it, but they failed to do so. The crow found that the tree was suitable for him to live in. Juliana every day brought water and food to the crow. She enjoyed its caw a lot, but at the same time, this caw was thunderous. One day, the grandmother spoke to her, saying, "Your mother and father want to see you. You have lived with me for so many years now. These have been the best years of my life, but your father and your mother need you. It's time for you to get back to them. You can visit anytime you want." Juliana cried and screamed, saying she didn't want to live with them and wanted to live with her grandmother. "But you must study there in Moscow in order to have a bright future," replied the grandmother. "Don't worry, I'll take care of the crow." Juliana cried and felt devastated because she didn't even remember her mother's face or her father's. She had not seen her father or mother for many years. She only remembers her mother's smell because every night in the evening she would hug her mother's clothes and then fall asleep. That's all she could remember. She did not feel safe and comfortable except with her tender grandmother. The grandmother embraced her granddaughter in a very touching scene. It's clear that this grandmother is saying goodbye to her granddaughter for the last time because she feels that her end is near. The next day, early in the morning, the grandmother wept bitterly because her granddaughter was leaving, but she'd never show it to her because that would make her become even more upset. The grandmother felt lonely and isolated because she had been in the company of her granddaughter for so long. But the grandmother was also convinced that life sometimes imposes on us situations and events that we do not want to face, but we have to face them so that we're not weak. The grandmother took the large bags to the train station and Juliana cried. The grandmother tried calming her down, saying she loved her very much and would never forget her. After that, the grandmother returned to her home. She passed away several days later. When Juliana learned about this, she descended into a terrible psychological state and cried all day and night. She couldn't even go to her grandmother's funeral. She couldn't believe her grandmother, who loved her so much, had died. She was filled with denial and thought her grandmother was still alive. Several weeks passed, and Juliana's life changed as she went to school daily. She felt that her life would be better this way, but unfortunately, on top of everything else, there were many problems happening between her father and mother, and they divorced. Her mother ended up marrying a doctor and a scientist named Evan. Anushka fully believed him to be a noble and moral person since he's a doctor. Sadly, all that glitters is not gold. Appearances can be deceiving. Beauty may have golden leaves, yet bitter fruit. Evan did not like Juliana at all, but he never explained it to anyone. He made her study extra lessons and indirectly made her hate studying altogether. He put too much pressure on her. When Juliana got good grades, he didn't praise her. But when she dropped one grade, he punished her severely. He would prevent her from eating for 2 days and would take the phone from her. The mother's attitude towards this was very pessimistic, as she believed that Evan was doing all this to her daughter because he loved her. Juliana hated her life and said she wanted to die to be with her grandmother. One day, the mother went to Juliana's room and found her lying on the floor and not moving. It was a tough day for the mother. They ended up burying Juliana in the village, right next to her grandmother. But at the funeral, something extraordinary happened. Dom, the crow, suddenly appeared, stood on Juliana, and put something in her mouth. A minute later, everyone was shocked when they saw the girl wake up and cough. The girl cried and admitted that Evan gave her strange pills and forced her to drink juice. He wanted to kill her. Evan was mortified that he had been caught, and the police immediately came and took him. The mother felt very guilty and decided that she would never return to Moscow and that instead she and her daughter would live in the village in the house of the dead grandmother.